Thank you for joining us today to celebrate the graduates of 2021. Welcome to our 2021 grad celebration and new alumni happy hour. We are happy to have you join us. We know that commencement has taken place and we celebrate the class of 2021 and welcome you as new alumni. We will start with the Share the Land acknowledgement. We recognize that all of us at UW-Tacoma learn, live, and work on or near the ancestral homeland of the Coast Salish people. In particular, we are situated on the traditional territory of the Puyallup. As people on this occupied territory, we have a responsibility to acknowledge the land, the ancestors who have cared for this land since time immemorial, and all our indigenous connections today. We also have the responsibility to acknowledge the histories of dispossession and forced removal that have allowed for the growth and survival of this institution. In light of this history, let us take active efforts to partner with our indigenous community members and neighbors as we continue our work together as a community of learners, leaders, and educators. If you're on Zoom, we ask that you remain muted during the presentations, unless we will give you the cue when you can unmute and you can send questions in the chat. It is now our pleasure to bring food enthusiast Steve Aiden to show us how to prepare or make an appetizer and husky cocktail and mocktail drink. Cooking and mixology has long been his passion. He has hosted cooking videos, curated signature cocktails for special occasions, and has led mixology webinars. Over to you, Steve.
Hello, everyone. Congratulations again to all of our new graduates, and thank you for being with me today. As Shauna said, my name is Steve Aiden, he, him, his pronouns. I am also an employee at UW-Tacoma. I specifically work in our Center for Student Involvement. This is my opportunity to shamelessly plug the Student Activities Board. I have a few folks who are graduating from there, so if you are in the YouTube or the Zoom, drop a line, say hello. But I'm super excited to be joining you all for this. My passion for cooking really started a long time ago, but I really fell into it this last year as we were all in quarantine. I needed to find a new hobby, and I realized you haven't really cooked for yourself since school. Not in the way that you used to, not in the way you want to. So that is when the Bon Appetit YouTube channel became my best friend for a while until they became really problematic. But I'm still following some of the folks who left that channel. If you know Claire Saffitz, I consider her my personal hero. Molly Boz up there too, Sola El Whaley. So I consider them some of my personal heroes and often cook their recipes, often am informed by them. So that's a little bit about me. My goal with food is to really make unique or fun experiences out of food. I grew up in the Midwest, and as much as I love my upbringing, it was a lot of basic steak and potatoes. The blander, the better. And not really about that. I love flavors. I love the explosion of flavors. So my goal with cooking is to find those new, exciting, and adventurous combinations, but also to look at food as a cultural exploration, to not just consume the food we're eating, but think about what's the heritage and the history behind those foods. So I will talk a little bit about where some of these things are from, what the influence is coming from. I think that's really important to name as you're also talking about food recipes of where am I borrowing this ingredient from? Why did I decide to do this? So without further ado, what I'm actually gonna start, I'm gonna hop right in right away and start showing you one of the first parts of the recipe. So one of the staple cocktails is called the Purple and Gold. That is a blackberry sage beer cocktail. I'm gonna show you how to make that a little bit later in this presentation, but the most important thing that you need to make this is actually a base simple syrup that is blackberry and sage. I'm gonna start right away with making that because it takes a little while. You also need to give it time to cool down. Otherwise, you're gonna have a hot beer drink, and that sounds real gross. So I'm gonna show you how to start making that syrup first. That way it has time to cool down before you wanna make that beer cocktail. So over here, I have a little saucepan. I've already filled it up with the 12 ounces of blackberries. I'm gonna bring this over here first. This is a muddler. This is a quintessential bartending tool. It really is just something you use to mash stuff. If you're making a mojito, it's what you would use to mash your mint leaves so you get that deliciousness. I have not done anything with the blackberries yet. What I'm going to start doing actually is just mashing them up for a little while. I want to start releasing the juices early so I get as much flavor out of these as possible without overcooking them and making them into like a jam reduction. You want to get the right consistency on your syrup, and you don't want it to turn into a jam, because you'd get a thick cocktail, and that would be also kind of gross. So start off, put your 12 ounces of blackberries right into that saucepan. And once you feel like you've gotten them good and mashed, I'll show this to the camera in just a moment so you kind of get an idea of what that looks like. It'll look, let's see if we can get some light on there. Something like this. It already kind of looks a little bit like a jam in and of itself, but it's just mashed blackberries. So I'm gonna put that back on the burner. You can go ahead and put the heat on right away to like a mid-range, medium-low, medium-high, somewhere in there. Now you're gonna start making a simple syrup out of it. Simple syrups are super easy. They're called simple because they're 1-to-1. 1 part water, 1 part sugar. That's a basic simple syrup. So you're gonna take 1 cup of water and add that in right away. This saucepan will get very full, so just be conscious of that. Give it a quick stir. Now I have 1 cup of sugar already measured out. Put that in, give it a moment to sort of break down a little bit. It'll kind of dissolve on its own. Again, I have a small saucepan here, so it's filling up pretty quickly. Giving that a quick stir. So that's the majority of what goes into this simple syrup. There's a couple other additives, so you get a more distinct flavor. So some of those things, and again, I've prepped these. I've got 8 sage leaves, and the recipe, I believe I said 8 to 10. It really depends on the size of those leaves. Sometimes you get sage sprigs that are huge. They've got enormous leaves. That's probably when you want to use 8. If you have ones that have like these smaller size leaves, you might want to add a couple more in. This one was pretty average. Most of them are average to small. So for this one, I decided to do 10. I really want that sage to come out. Here's the great thing about simple syrups. They're really all about timing and watching the consistency. You can put anything in them. You just got to pull them out later. So all I got to do with this is throw it in. That's it. As this comes to a slight boil, it'll start pulling out more of those extracts, flavors, and juices from the blackberries I didn't already pre-mash. So that'll be delicious. The next thing you'll want to add in quick is a pinch of kosher salt. What is kosher salt versus table salt? Table salt usually has iodine added in. It's an additional chemical additive. It slightly modifies the flavor. Kosher salt is specifically just straight up salt. It does actually taste a little different. A lot of professional recipes will call for this. There's 2 types. There's Diamond, which is what I'm using, and there's Morton's kosher salt. Diamond tends to be a little bit more fine, whereas the Morton tends to be a little coarser. So you'll actually, if you get both of them, you'll see a size difference. So if you see recipes that are calling for kosher salt, you'll often see them say a 1/4 teaspoon of this, but a teaspoon of this because of that coarseness. I'm using Diamond. I call for a pinch. A pinch is usually involving multiple fingers. So a dash is usually this. A pinch is 2 to 3 fingers. If you love your salt, use 3 fingers and your thumb. If you're like, I don't know how I feel about salt, I'm trying to do a low salt thing, 2 fingers it is. I love salt. I told you earlier, I love Molly Boz. She salts her smoothies. I do that now too. So you're gonna take a good pinch of salt and throw that right in. Salt is amazing because what it does for us is it enhances flavor. It really helps us to notice all the different things that are going on. So if I didn't put that salt in, when it hits our tongue, it won't give us as much of a distinction between the blackberry and the sage. Whereas adding that salt, once that'll hit our tongue, we can kind of notice all those different flavor palettes and notes. Stirring that in. Again, this is starting to heat up and come to a low rolling boil. The other thing that gets added in, this is kind of the weird one. It is a 1/4 teaspoon of fresh cracked black pepper. So I'm throwing that in because when you're adding different flavors, you want to make sure you have a good balance. To be honest, I don't really love sweet things that much. This drink is really good. It's not my normal flavor palette. I don't really like sweet that much, and this drink ends up pretty sweet. So to help kind of cut through that sweetness of the blackberry, of all of that sugar, you add in a little bit of that herbiness of the sage. It's nice to also add in a little bit of heat or a little bit of salt. Salt really wouldn't go super well with blackberry outside of enough to give it a flavor enhancer. So I opted to add in the heat. But again, different types of pepper, some would work better than others. I decided black pepper is just the way to go. When you put it into the drink, you'll notice that it just adds a little bit more of that tang and a little bit more of that heat into your tongue. So again, it makes a more complex flavor palette. So it's not the only thing. You're not just tasting that sweetness of the blackberry. So what I'm going to do now is I've stirred this together. I have it on a medium heat. And what it's going to do is it's just going to come to a slow boil. I'm going to keep checking on it on occasion and stirring occasionally. It is a sugar thing, so be careful with it. If you've ever gotten a sugar burn in your life, it sucks. So just be careful when you're working with these simple syrups. Make sure, I'm probably setting a bad example. You probably want to put this in a bigger saucepan because you will want to stir it occasionally. So as I'm walking through a couple other things, I'm just going to keep an eye on that as I'm going. If you feel confident in the kitchen, that works. If you don't, maybe just focus on the syrup for now. Once it comes to a rolling boil, we're going to leave it on a slow simmer for probably about 10 to 15 minutes. Again, help those juices and those natural oils in the sage get extracted so we get something really flavorful. I'm just going to let that sit for a little while and tell you what to do next. So before I get into our first appetizer, I want to talk a little bit about what motivated me to create these specific recipes for you. So as Shauna said, I've been recruited to make staple drinks for different events. I do love some of the basics. I know one of those mixology webinars she mentioned was just, how do you make a good martini? How do you make a good Manhattan? What are some of those basic things? One of my big values in cooking and exploration is to make sure it is still accessible to folks as well as fits the occasion. When I was approached about doing this, my vision was a little bit more thinking back to my own experience of, I really enjoyed cooking in high school. I went to college, didn't have a full kitchen to work in, was tired all the time. Then I went to grad school, had a full kitchen, was even more tired all the time. So I was thinking about folks who are just graduating college. Maybe that's similar for your experience. Maybe you love cooking, but you haven't had the same opportunity to engage with it. Maybe you need to start getting back into it. And also, now is the time to celebrate. Now is the time that maybe you want to get folks together and gather to celebrate your experiences, to celebrate your accomplishments. So I want to give you some appetizers that can be good party favors, that'll give you some bang for your buck, but also something that isn't super complex, relatively easy to make, and also you can make a lot of. Maybe you have a good number of people coming over, so you want to make as much hummus as possible. Hummus is great. I landed on hummus because, one, you can make a lot of it, and fresh hummus is always better than store-bought hummus. I have found some good store-bought hummuses, but there's something deeply satisfying about making your own. The freshness, fresh lemon juice, I think is the key there. But what I also love about hummus is once you get a good base recipe, you can do all sorts of stuff with it. You can add in some wild card flavors. You can experiment with the herbs and the spices. You can modify some things. You can add some toppings. And all of a sudden, instead of just one hummus, you can have 3 or 4 or 5 hummuses that really came from the exact same source. You just separated them out, maybe added a different topping here, maybe put a little bit more spice here. And then all of a sudden, instead of just impressing someone with a really big hummus, you're impressing all of your people with 5 different hummuses. Look at that variety. Look at that deliciousness. I had the same approach in developing the cocktails. I wanted to give you all something that, again, you can kind of modify. The combination of beer and tequila Super simple. I created a few different versions of flavors that I think go really well together, like that blackberry sage, like the mango chamoy, that is also an example. But my recommendation for you all is try some other stuff. Try the same simple syrup recipe, but maybe instead of blackberries, try blueberry. Try blueberry and mint. That could probably be really good. Actually, don't try that. I'm gonna try making that and save that for myself, do something else. But you get my point. You can try different things and see what happens and experiment with it a little bit. And that's something I wanted to offer to you all. Take these recipes, test them if there's something you want to try, but also I'm giving you my stamp of approval to say, I don't really like onion, but I do really like fennel. I want to give fennel a try and see what happens. So the other thing I want to say about the beer cocktails is I think beer cocktails are so perfect for summer. They end up feeling really refreshing. Beer is great, but there's something so satisfying about adding a little sweetness or a little kick of some sort to them. It just that's why we love beer shanties. Lemon and beer, so good, so summery. So that's a little bit about where these recipes came from. I wanted to give you that variety as well as stuff that frankly, you might already have some of this stuff in your kitchen. Maybe you already have garbanzo beans. Maybe you already have a bunch of limes or other things sitting around. So, and maybe you have some of those cheap beers, right? When you're having a big family gathering, if you're like me and you're from Wisconsin, the first thing you're grabbing is Pabst Blue Ribbon. It's going to be a good party. It's going to be a good time. So let's take PBR, which some people have positive feelings about. Some people don't like them. I love it personally, straight up, but let's enhance it. Let's make it even better. Let's make it something exciting. Something I want to name about these hummuses I think is important is just acknowledging the different influences I used in these recipes. So hummus is traditionally a Middle Eastern or Mediterranean staple, but you'll notice in some of the recipes, I'm also pulling influence from other cultures. So the spiced chocolate hummus, which I will be showing you how to make, includes a chili crisp, which actually originates from China. The combination of chocolate and some of the spices that I have talked about or that are included in this recipe that's now on the screen also come from sort of this idea of Mexican hot chocolate, that spice and flavor. So something I want to name as someone in food is noticing how this fusion is taking place. And fusion is a super kind of heated debate right now in cuisine. It really comes down to appropriation. How much of these cultures are you stealing or borrowing and making profit off of versus acknowledging the culture? So something I want to name right here, right now is just as you're experimenting with flavors and palettes and all of these things, develop that awareness, acknowledge where things are coming from, and seek out some research on, what is the cultural history of this specific ingredient. So that is my spiel. That is my TED Talk. You'll notice I keep bouncing back here. I turned the heat down a little bit because it is starting to get to a boil, and it was almost overflowing. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to actually show you my base hummus recipe. So that is the roasted garlic hummus. So in front of me, I actually have everything kind of laid out. You'll notice right here is my food processor. This is a small one, so if you had a bigger one, you could probably double this recipe. I believe this is a 3 or 4 cup. It perfectly fits the ingredients that are there, perfect size. But if you had a bigger one, you could double it. I like using a food processor. It's pretty easy to puree things in. But if you don't have a food processor, a blender will work as well. A blender just might take a little bit longer. So in front of me, I have all of those ingredients. I've got a can of rinsed garbanzo beans. So garbanzo beans have this great ingredient inherent called aquafaba. It's the water juice thing that is in the can, and you usually have to drain and wash that. I did not do this, but I would actually recommend trying to save your aquafaba. It can be really good for especially vegan baking. It'll often be used as an egg substitute. So if you're into that, save your aquafaba. So in the food processor, I just dumped my rinsed garbanzo beans. I have my salt and cumin already measured out here. So I'm just gonna throw that in. This is tahini. This is a sesame seed paste, delicious When you put it with other things, I wouldn't recommend just tasting it on your own. That's not the best. So that is a 1/4 cup, and that's gonna go right in. And then I have my garlic here. I've already pre-roasted this because it takes 25 to 30 minutes to roast these at 325. And I'm not gonna make you sit here for an extra hour waiting for these to roast and then cool. Make sure your cloves are fully cool. You'll notice in my recipe I call for 4. The garlic bulb I was using is pretty small. You can see some of these are very tiny. So when I first developed this recipe, I actually had like big, sizable cloves that were like maybe yay big. These are a lot tinier. So I decided to up it. There are 6 here because they're a little smaller. Those are gonna go right in. If you love garlic, put more in. If you don't love garlic, maybe just reduce it. Personal preference in hummus is always important. So that is all of that. The next things you're gonna wanna add is, I've got my olive oil here. You're gonna do 2 tablespoons of that. The main goal with hummus is to make sure that the end product is smooth, both to taste or to sight as well as to touch. The oil and the water I'm adding in now is what's gonna give you more of that smoothness. In the same way that there's this debate about, is a taco a sandwich or whatever, is hummus a smoothie? Could be something to contribute to that conversation as well. I don't know, I'm not gonna start that huge debate. But once you have all those ingredients added, just go ahead and put the top on. This will obviously be loud, so I apologize for that. But what you're gonna do is you're just gonna blend it until it looks smooth. Sometimes, again, like I said, in a blender, that could take a little bit longer than in a food processor. So just keep going. If it is taking a really long time for all of your stuff to come together, what I would recommend is actually adding another tablespoon of oil and or water. Just make sure you alternate between the two. So if you're like, it needs a little bit more, I'm gonna do a tablespoon of water, make sure the next thing you add is oil. That'll just help the hummus come together a little bit better, but maybe you only need a little bit more. So I'm gonna go ahead and blend this. If my food processor would work. There we go. Again, this is pretty full for a food processor, so I've got this spatula. I'm just gonna occasionally scrape down those sides to make sure everything's getting some attention, everything's getting blended smoothly. All right, I'm gonna show you all this, and then I'm gonna fight my food processor to get it back on. But you can see that's still a little bit chunky. You can kind of see some of the bits of bean still there that haven't fully broken down yet. So, and sometimes the reason for the fluctuation, even if you're using the same measurement, is maybe for whatever reason, that can of garbanzo beans is just a little drier. They don't break down the same way. This I can tell is actually gonna take a little bit longer. So what I'm actually gonna do is I'm gonna add another tablespoon of water to this and then keep going. As you're doing this, I would recommend putting on music, maybe having a little dance party, because you will just be sitting here holding your food processor for a while. Some are automatic, some are, you push a button, it does it on its own. Mine is not, mine is just hold it down for a while. All right, so Now what you'll notice is it looks a little bit smoother. It actually looks kind of creamy in some ways. Don't mind my non-technical lighting. It looks kind of creamy almost. So that's a pretty good consistency. This is actually done. So basic level hummus of just that roasted garlic is super easy. For plating, we've got this. I've just got these bowls. You can use a bowl, you can use a dish, whatever you've got lying around, totally works. My syrup is looking pretty good too. I'm gonna give it a little bit longer and then I'll show you what to do next with that. So what do you do with your hummus next? So this is obviously smooth, creamy. You can dip pita chips, you can dip vegetables, you can dip all your standards in there. What I like to do with hummus is also add a little bit of variety. What are some of those extra textures we're gonna be putting in? So my recipe, I have called for, here they are, some pistachios to get added. This is a pretty common ingredient in some Middle Eastern cooking. One of the best flavor combinations for me is pistachio, rose, and cardamom. Amazing. So I'm gonna use pistachios for this. And then I also have a spice hidden somewhere over here. Za'atar. It's a combination of sesame seed, sumac, thyme, and marjoram. Incredible. So I'm gonna put that on top. I wanted to give this one more quick whirl. I'm looking at it and it's not as creamy as I want. And sometimes your food processor will fight you if you take it off and you've got to put it on just the right way for it to work again. It's gonna fight me. So I'm gonna call this good enough. If you want to blend it a little bit more, just know you're gonna have to fight your food processor a little bit. So I'm gonna take this little spindly thing out. Now I'm gonna show you what I usually do to plate this. So easy enough, you just take the hummus that's in here, put it in your serving bowl. Don't worry about being too neat with this yet. I'll show you a quick technique of some of the things you can do to kind of clean it up and make it look a little tidier. I'm just using this rubber spatula to scoop it out. Cool. Not the prettiest yet. You've got some stuff lying around there. That happens. What I would recommend doing is just grabbing a paper towel, getting one of the corners a little wet, and then just kind of running it along the rim, grabbing some of that stuff that isn't centered with the rest. Looks a lot neater and prettier now. So now that you have it plated, I'm going to take a little bit of that za'atar, grab a pinch of it. I like making it very centralized, making it so that there's like a little focal point. So what I mean by that is I made a little circle of za'atar. And then what I'm going to do with the pistachios is just quickly crush them. All you have to do to crush something in case of nuts is honestly, I'm just using my chef's knife and pressing down on the nuts on a cutting board. Boom. And then you can put that on top. When you're dipping, that adds a nice little crunch, a nice little spice of like spike of flavor. And then actually to finish this off, I'm gonna do a quick drizzle of olive oil. There you go. There is your basic roasted garlic hummus. So this is your first appetizer. Like any hummus, you can dip it with pita chips, pretzels, various vegetables. My friend Amanda, whose kitchen I am borrowing, thank you Amanda, by the way, we have some baby carrots and some celery set out, but I'd also recommend some maybe radishes, peppers. I hate mushrooms, but mushrooms would be good too if you like those. So that would be a good option for you as well. Okay, so you've got one hummus down. I also am trying to show you basically, if you're trying to juggle all of these recipes at once, you're trying to get prepared for your party, what's your flow in the kitchen? I would recommend following my flow. you got to start with the syrups. These need time to cool. So this looks pretty good. This has been going for probably about 10-ish minutes. What you're gonna do now after that time is up, this is still very hot. I'm gonna do this because I am either confident or foolish. Not sure which it is, but I'm gonna do it anyway, just so you can see what the next step would be. I would recommend letting this cool for even longer because I literally just took this off of a hot burner. But you've got all this stuff floating in there now, right? You've got your seeds, maybe some other parts of the blackberries that haven't broken down. Your sage leaves are absolutely still in here. You don't want that in your syrup and you don't want that in your cocktail. So I've got this little mesh strainer. I like using this because usually when I make a syrup, I'll put it directly into a mason jar. And then that becomes the home it lives in. So I like having this small one because I can fit it right on top of this mason jar, not overfill it and have it pour out everywhere. It's just gonna take a couple rounds. So I'm gonna move this down again so you can see what I'm doing. So I've got my mason jar set up right here. I'm gonna put my strainer right on top and I am slowly gonna just stream some of that in. And of course I missed a little bit. So if you saw that spill, that happens, that's normal. So what you're gonna do, I'm gonna set this down or it won't burn a countertop. So you'll notice all of this steam. This is still very, very hot. You'll notice this big puddle where I completely missed. Welcome to cooking. Welcome to the kitchen. You make mistakes, you clean them up afterwards. What I really wanna show you is obviously you have all of this stuff. This is your seeds, your pulp, and there's even a little sage leaf poking up right there. There's still some pretty good juice in there. So where did I put them? I threw it in the sink right away. So what I would actually recommend doing is taking that and giving it a light little push. Not too much of a push where you're starting to shove some pulp through and maybe that ends up in your syrup, but just enough to move that around so it releases some of the extra like syrup that might be caught in there or some of the extra juice that's still in the pulp. I am gonna cheat a little bit. Again, I'm not gonna make you all sit through this whole process and watch me strain the syrup, wait for it to cool, wait for me to spill things everywhere again. I actually have this syrup pre-made from a little while ago when I was testing these recipes. So today I'm gonna use this. All you need to do next is keep doing what I just showed you how to do. Keep pouring out the syrup into a container, keep straining it so that way you have it. What I would recommend is if you start doing it hot or if it's still warm, make sure you leave the lid off because you need some of that steam to escape and just, it needs time to cool on its own. So let it cool on its own. Once it becomes room temp, quickly shove it in the fridge actually. Bring it down even further so that way these cocktails don't require ice. So that means you want to refrigerate everything beforehand so everything's already cold. So this has been in the fridge. Also, since it is using fresh juice, you'll need to put it in the fridge to keep it cool. So without further ado, let's get to making a cocktail. So this is the staple drink. This is your purple and gold drink. And I'm gonna show you how to do that quick. I have this glass. The first thing you're gonna wanna do actually with this drink is you're actually gonna wanna make sure it has its sugar rim right away. So I have a lime here, and I'm gonna use this for a garnish. To do a sugar rim, you can either use water or a juice. I'm actually gonna use a little bit of lime juice today because I already told you all, I don't like sweet as much. So I want something to kind of cut the sweetness a little bit. So I'm just gonna run this lime around and get a nice little rim of lime juice. Then I've got a plate of sugar here. And I'm just gonna go ahead and dip that in and kind of swirl it around. Boom, there you go. There's a nice little sugar rim for you. You wanna do that first because as you're pouring ingredients in, obviously you can't tip your glass back over once those ingredients are in there or it's a bad time for everyone. So make sure you get your rim first if it's something like this. All right. So again, don't mind my mess. Here is our cocktail glass. I've got my syrup I've already made right here. Now you just do your measurements. So I have my bar over here. I've got this thing. This is called a jigger, common bar ingredient. It's a way to measure your pours. So top one is 1 ounce. This is 1.5 ounces. For this, I like to do a 1.5 ounce pour of the syrup. For those out there, this is a standard shot of 1.5 ounces. It goes right in the glass. Next thing you'll do, I've got some limes that are halved over here. Nice juicer. Go ahead and squeeze lime juice directly into that. Then comes the tequila. You're gonna go ahead and use another 1.5 standard shot pour. A little secret I like to give folks is a standard cocktail, not with like beer or anything added. Standard pour of any cocktail you'll get is a total of 3 ounces. And that could be a variety of alcohols that come together. You know, 1.5 ounces of tequila, whatever it might be. 1 ounce of Campari, 1 ounce of gin, and 1 ounce of sweet vermouth. That makes a Negroni, which is my favorite cocktail, but it's 3 ounces. So not including the lime juice, you've got 3 ounces in here. So this is your base, and you'll want to give it a quick stir, just to make sure all that stuff comes together. Now, why did you use PBR or Rainier? Here's my thing about beer cocktails. The cheaper the beer, the better the cocktail tastes. You don't want to use some sort of fancy beer that you should drink on its own to make something. You want to use a beer that maybe isn't as quality. You want to be able to enhance it and elevate it. So for this one, I'm going to use Rainier. I've got both PBR and Rainier. Both of them work. Here's my Wisconsin roots. Here's my new Washingtonian life. So I'm going to use Rainier because my friend Amanda, again, whose kitchen I'm using, dibs this one for when it's done, and she prefers Rainier. So next step, just crack open your beer and pour carefully because you want to avoid that sugar rim. You also want to make sure you keep some of that carbonation. You probably will have a little bit of beer left. That's okay. Now you have a chaser. I'm going to take my bar spoon again. Give this a light, gentle twirl just to get everything incorporated, but not so hard to lose the carbonation. For garnish, I have another blackberry I've already cut so it slips cleanly onto that lip. And then I'm actually going to take the lime I used earlier to create the sugar rim and put that on as well. So there you have our beer cocktail, our staple, our purple and gold. So there you go. You've got 1 drink down, you've got 1 hummus down, you've got plenty more to go. So what I'm going to do real fast, I'm going to give this food processor a quick rinse because we're going to need to make the chocolate one in here. Now, Steve, this is an appetizer. Why are you doing something with chocolate? Isn't chocolate a dessert? Funny you should ask. Yes, it is. But don't we all deserve chocolate all the time, 24/7? Don't we deserve it for breakfast, lunch, and dinner? There's a reason we have Cocoa Pebbles and Cocoa Puffs. So enjoy your chocolate whenever you can. I want to give this a quick rinse because you'll notice in the recipe that this recipe does not call for garlic. Garlic and chocolate would not be a good combination at all. That'd be pretty gross. So I'm gonna give that a quick rinse. And the same philosophy is gonna follow here. I have everything pre-measured out so I can just throw it in. That's one of the best things about kitchen prep is you can measure everything out beforehand. It'll make your life a lot easier when you're actually putting your recipe together. So, same thing. I've got my garbanzo beans, excuse me. Those are gonna go in. Got my tahini. Got all my dry ingredients pre-measured out right here. Those are going in. Now, you're gonna want a little sweetness in this. I recommend using agave syrup. I found some recipes that did some similar stuff. They used maple. I don't really like that. I think that would be too earthy, too woodsy, whereas agave is just a nice sweet base. So you're gonna add 3 tablespoons of that in. Then you're gonna do 2 tablespoons of water and my olive oil, which is right here. Same deal. All that stuff is thrown together. Go ahead. Oh no. Oh, my food processor does not want to cooperate today. We'll give it one more shot, and if not, I'll just walk you through what you do next. Yeah, it doesn't want to cooperate. So, of course, technical difficulties, right? Right when I need it most. Same deal applies. Blend until it's smooth and creamy. Add a little bit of water, a little bit of olive oil if you need to. And then I have chopped chocolate to put on top, as well as chili crisp. I mentioned this earlier. This originates from China. It is super delicious, super spicy, but it is very good to add spice and chocolate together. So, sorry about the food processor not working. You would do the same thing I did with this one, put it in a plate, put those delicious toppings on, go to town. Something I would recommend eating that with would actually be apples. Fruit is great to pair with chocolate in any way. So pair it with some chocolate, pair it with some apples, pair it with maybe some pears would be really good. Anything along those lines. So I am just gonna check, do we have time for one more cocktail or do we need to move on? Waiting for some cues behind the scenes.
We would need to move on, but we do have the recipes available. Everybody should have gotten the recipes that registered, and they are posted on the Grad Experience website as well.
Cool. Thank you everyone for letting me give you some quick demonstrations on some of these recipes. I hope you try them out, and I hope you have some fun with varying them yourself. Like I said, these are some suggestions and some guidelines for that base. Mix it up, add some new flavors, try what you like. Enjoy and congratulations.
Thank you, Steve. So now we will have Mintha Hines-Wilson, Vice Chancellor Mintha Hines-Wilson from Student Affairs, with her remarks and a toast.
Well, thank you so much. And let's snap it up for Steve. Steve, I so appreciated all of those recipes and the history behind all of that. And just so you know, as soon as I finish, I will be jumping in my car, motoring on over to you, and we will continue the party, and I will have a bottle of champagne with me. So, UW Tacoma, I am so honored to join the class of 2021 and celebrate one of the greatest successes for university students, and that's attaining a college degree. You chose a major, you studied hard, you wrote papers, prepared presentations, solved lab assignments, took examinations, and you paid all those parking permits. Taken as a whole, you have fulfilled all of the necessary requirements, and today, June 12th, marks your commencement from the University of Washington, Tacoma. Collectively, I think of you as the marvelous class of 2021. And I want to say that again. I really do think of you as a marvelous class. I will remember the many ways in which you have been active in our community, the many turns you took to get here, and I'll remember how you weathered the storms and how you soaked up the sun and how you responded to the many, many email messages that I sent to you over the years. Now, I know that you might have some hesitation about life after college, and here I will offer advice from a wise woman. You might know her. Her name is Oprah. And so here's a quote from Oprah. No matter what challenges or setbacks or disappointments you may encounter along the way, you will find true success and happiness if you endeavor to fulfill the highest, most truthful expression of yourself. Use your energy to lift yourself up, lift your family up, and lift up the people around you. Now, the word commencement, big word, and it means a new start. You're ending one journey and traveling onto new roads as an alum. You will find fellow Huskies nearly everywhere, and the Alumni Network is a powerful benefit of a UW education. So let's raise our glass. Hopefully you've got one of those martinis, cocktails, mocktails that Steve just provided us with the recipe for. Raise your glass and let's toast the marvelous, marvelous class of 2021. The future is bright because of what you have learned and who you have become. You have the heart and the smarts. Go out and make us proud. Cheers.
Cheers.
Let's excited about that one, aren't you?
All right, back to you.
Thank you, Mentha. So now we will have some game activities facilitated by our game host, Chris Fuentes. It'll be Name That Tune, Name That Challenge, seen and heard on TikTok, and UW Tacoma Trivia Mashup. We have a few great prizes that people may win. So to engage in that game, those who are watching on YouTube, you should join us in Zoom. And we will start the game there. The link is already in the YouTube chat for you. So we look forward to seeing you soon. Once again, congratulations to the class of 2021. Thank you.